welcome again, or if you're new, welcome. So today we are on part 2 of our contribution to the Cambridge Festival, and you're going to join us at the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology on the other half of our off-site storage move. And today we are joined by 2 members of the fantastic collections team who are looking after and doing the hard graft of moving all of the objects over to this new site. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and they're going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Eleanor.
I'm sorry.
As a preamble, we're both members of the Stores Move team. We've been here since September 2020. Yeah, and this is how far we'll show you how far we've got to this day.
Awesome.
So before we get started on the tour of seeing the wonderful things that they're doing, if there's any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to answering them.
Okay. So we're currently in the Centre for Material Culture, or the CMC, or the bunker, as it's known as well. This is our new store. It has been entirely stripped out from the inside and redone, which makes it much safer for objects. And it's also much better for people. It's so much better than our old store. We have like new toilets, we have a new kitchen, which means that hopefully we'll be able to host more researchers, more source communities. So yeah, overall a much better store.
Great.
Okay, so this is the airlock. We have an airlock to try and keep the internal temperature and humidity of the stores as consistent as possible, because that's what's best for objects. And in order to kind of maintain that, this room, we have doors on each side, but either that door or that door can be open at once, but not both unless we override it. And that means that we have a fairly consistent and regulated internal temperature and humidity. We can override it, and we will have to do it at some point when we bring in really, really long objects. But that's like a future problem. We haven't troubleshooted. No. Okay, to the freezers. So this is our freezer room, and behind you we've got a standing freezer, and then we've got 3 chest freezers along the other wall here. So we use freezers if we ever have any sort of evidence of pest activity, so things like grass, which is bug poo, or casings, or sometimes carcasses. If we've got any of that, it's usually cleaned off by our conservator, and then just to be extra safe, we freeze it, and that kills anything that might still be in there, although we haven't really seen any current pest activity thus far. And it's usually frozen for about 3 days before we take it out and pop it on the racking over here. So this is some stuff we took out today. Sounding very Blue Peter with that. So you can still see it's got a bit of condensation on it. But that will thaw for about 3 days again, and then it will be rehoused either upstairs or in the file store, depending on whether it's our or out. We cover it in plastic to sort of create a microenvironment inside the boxes and make sure no pests can get out. In the meantime, like Anthony said, because it's a new store, it's completely pest-free and we want to keep it that way. So we have to be careful when we're bringing in material like this to make sure we don't release any mosquitoes into the store. And the objects inside will either be wrapped or sort of near paper to absorb any moisture. So they're lovely and safe in there, and then eventually go up to their new homes. So we'll take you into our first floor now. A lot of coordination with this. So this is the Fell store, the downstairs storage room. It's mainly where we store archaeology, but we do store some bigger anthropology objects as well that are too big or too heavy to go upstairs. And we do have to have quite specific weight limits in the upstairs room, quite specific, like quite low loading weights. So really heavy things do have to come down here. So we have got some of our heavier objects in already that were brought over by our shippers because they were too heavy and too big for our team to handle. So this is a stone coffin. It's part of a pair, and the other one is actually on display in the museum on the ground floor from Arbery, and it weighs like 1.3 tons or something. So it definitely has to stay downstairs. These are special racks for the Maudsley casts, which obviously, as you can see, we've not moved yet, but will get moved across soon. They're currently at Shorts, but they'll be much happier and much safer on these special, specifically built racks.
So on this side over here, how are these things sorted, like arranged, or is it just?
So I think this is all archaeology material, and they were the ones that were brought by the art shippers. I'm not entirely sure how they're arranged. Usually we store archaeology by place and by time period, but this might not actually be their final destination. So sometimes we bring things to the store and we do have to then move them around again.
Well, we'll have a better idea of where stuff goes, but we've got everything here. I think that's... So we'll take you over now to one of the best parts of the new store, is our brand new shiny roller racking. If you speak to anyone who works in museums, libraries, archives, roller racking is like half of it. So this is really exciting. So we have the roller racking so that we can sort of stack our shelves up better, get a bit more space in here. They have locking mechanisms on them, so you never have to worry about crushing your co-workers. And we'll take you down one of our aisles now and show you one of our sort of typical archaeology boxes. So this is early medieval archaeology box. It's just mixed England, and you can see some of the Stores Move team's beautiful packing in there. This is a lot more satisfying than the...
So how long would a box like this take you guys to pack?
To pack crystal boxes, so these, we call these crystal boxes. I don't know if that's because they're clear like crystal or because they have crystals in them. It's a question that's haunted me forever. But with the crystal boxes, because they tessellate quite nicely, they actually pack up quite quickly because you just kind of stack them in order. So what takes the time is packing things into the tiny boxes because you've got to make tiny little puffs, which are what we use to protect the objects with. And you can see around the edge we've got Jiffy, which is a sort of a soft absorbent material to protect the objects from the edges of the box. So that's what will take the time of a box like this, is actually the setup. But we're very lucky that because we work in a big team, a box like this we wouldn't usually do by ourselves because it would take a while. So often this will be like 3 or 4 people working together on one box, which is really nice to do.
What sort of things would go into a box?
So this box is all early medieval bits. So we've got some beads. So these are amber, these are glass, and that's a brooch that's probably made from copper alloy. So the boxes that we have here will contain loads of different things. So we have lots of ceramics in these boxes, but we generally try and sort things by type. So this will all be sort of personal adornment or things that were found in a grave.
Great.
Onwards to the workroom.
Yeah.
Let's see what other cool things you guys have.
So we also have motion sensor lighting all over the store, which helps to make sure the objects aren't in the light too much when nobody's here, but it's also like an eco thing, so that we're not wasting electricity when we're not in a room. So if you notice down the aisle, if it's quite dark, sometimes we have to go dark stuff to light them back up.
Great.
So this is the workroom, and it's a specific space for working on objects and for hosting groups of people who might come and see the objects in the store. So we have big tables, so we can unroll textiles, and we can have big objects down here, but also so that we can have people seated here, so that we can have events and actually have people in the store looking at the objects,
Yeah.
which is a big part of this project, is about making objects more accessible.
This is also where we transport everything to our upstairs stores. So we've got a massive industry lift here. We can show you the inside of. Should we open it funky noise.
If we can.
Oh, it was upstairs. So this is how we have to transport everything upstairs, because you'll notice we'll go up in a minute, a little spiral staircase, which isn't the best for carrying things up. So we use this for everything.
It's not really safe to carry a box up the spiral staircase, so even a very tiny box has to go in the lift, which is quite funny because the lift is so massive.
It's for everything but people.
Including a tiny box.
Yeah,
A tiny box.
and if something won't fit in the lift, it will have to be stored downstairs. We've not got any other options.
Cool.
I guess before we head in, all of these rooms have names. Can you talk us a bit more about names?
Yes, so the rooms in this building are named after people who were important in the museum's history. And we and the other members of staff of the museum actually got to vote on who the rooms were named after, which is really nice because I think we managed to pick out some slightly more underrepresented groups. So both this door, O'Reilly, and downstairs, Fowl, are named after women, which is a really nice thing.
Yes, so this is the O'Reilly store. This is where we store our anthropology material. This is upstairs because it's a lot lighter. And we have to do maths on all of our shelves to make sure the weights are all correct and stuff like that. So that's why we've chosen to put anthropology upstairs and archaeology downstairs. Here we've got our long span shelves, which are for boxes that aren't standard size. So you can see as well we've got the black boxes which are made of Corax. So they're specially made boxes for objects that are fragile and need a bit of extra protection.
The objects on these shelves, this isn't actually their permanent home. They're just here waiting, a little bit like some of the objects downstairs, and they'll be given a permanent home when we've figured out the space a little bit more, I think is the plan. On this side we have racking, which we're going to put longer objects on. So I think the idea is spears are going to be mounted onto these racks because they're much happier being stored upright than they would be in a box.
I don't think we could get a box big enough for a lot of them. A lot of them are over 2 meters long, and that would be quite a box. And here we've got our shelves for shields. So you can see we've got a few of the shields already stored on them, but that will be eventually when we've processed and brought over all of our shields. That's where these will live.
Wow.
But with the exception of some of the long span shelving and the kind of the shields and the spears, most anthropology material is stored by country. So we try and keep things as much as we can grouped together, which is better for the object and also makes it much easier to organise the store.
And these are starting to fill up.
Yeah, this is all of the Africa that we've done so far.
Wow.
And we'll show you a box that's been packed. So this is a box I packed and I found it very, very satisfying, which is why I've decided to show it off a little bit. So it's a box of spears from Cameroon. Excuse the rustling. And because the spears at some point in their history have been coated in like a dark oily substance, they're quite sticky. So we had to come up with a different packing technique to keep them safe because they would have stuck to the active tissue, which is our normal material. So what our conservator Aisha recommended is we use this resist paper. So it's sort of shiny paper, kind of a bit like baking paper, but not, to separate all the spears, and that just keeps them so that they don't stick. But you can see a bit of the residue on the side there. But I found the spears really satisfying to pack because they just line up so nicely. Yeah, so this was probably one of my favourite things I've ever packed. And yeah, I really enjoyed
Did it take a while to pack?
it. Took ages. There's about 50 spears in this box.
Wow.
So I had to make all of these tiny little like sausage puffs. So there's one of these at the end of every spear to keep them from moving down the box, and also one in between every spear to keep them from bumping together. So it did take me quite a while. I think it took me pretty much a whole day to pack this box, but I think it's worth it. I think when you see the objects housed like this, it makes all the time and the sort of, you know, the frustration with the materials and things, it just really makes it worth it. So yeah, so if we carry on down, so you'll see there's a bank of empty shelves in the middle here. This will be for countries we haven't covered yet. So when we come in, I'll South African collections, our collections, and then sort of Asian and Pacific collections. So down this end we have South American collections, which was one of the, I think it was the first anthropology collection that our project covered, and it was a really lovely collection. I think we were all very fond of various things that we found. So the Mexico collection was really, really nice, and we have a big collection of objects associated with Day of the Dead. And there were some extremely fun objects, weren't there? So many amazing things. So we've got an object out, just to show you. It came out of this box, this wooden box. And it is a model Ferris wheel. So it's associated with Day of the Dead, which is a very important celebration in the Mexican calendar. It's a relatively recent object for the museum. It came in the 90s. And yeah, it's a decorative model. It has moving parts, which, as you can see, we have disabled, immobilized, using plastizote and tissue. So it's been put down onto a Corex box to make it easier to lift in and out. And then we've used all these little bits to make sure that the pieces can't move, because if objects move in transit, they're much more likely to become damaged. Because an object can actually sometimes be its own worst enemy. It can cause itself problems in transit, which is why we have to make sure moving parts can't move. So packing like this, I think it took about a day to get it all done. But I can show you that if we do take... So this is plastizote, which is like a plasticky foam. It's kind of squishy. If you take that off, you can see that the little people, they swing. So they're super cute. And if you turn this handle, the whole Ferris wheel does rotate, which is really
Very
fun.
cool.
Yeah. But yeah, we had to pack it in this way, firstly because it was at risk of kind of becoming damaged in transit, but also because, so as Sam was saying, we often pack using tissue paper around an object, but because this has got pigment on it that's kind of vulnerable to coming away, if you have sometimes rough tissue paper around the edges, it can take off the surface, which is why we decided to pack this without anything around it, that all of its support comes from like the internal structure.
Great.
Well, question, right? Both of you. So, because you guys work with so many different materials, how do you know like what they are and how to look after them? Like, it's a tough one, but...
Well, first of all, we're quite lucky. Usually the database will say what material it is. But I think at this point we've been doing it for about 18 months now. You get a really good handle on what materials are and what you can kind of expect. I mean, I still get confused sometimes between what's bone, what's ivory, what's Gordon wood. Yeah,
They're quite similar.
just things like that. But you kind of get a feel for it. And when you work with an object, so we process objects from beginning to end. So we'll get a box down, open the box, process the objects, so do the database bits and things like that, photograph them, unpack them. So because you personally spend that time with the object, you kind of get an understanding of where its weak points are and how it's fragile and things like that. So it's not so much necessarily knowing what the materials are, it's sort of having a knowledge of the object itself. But I think the knowledge base in our team is incredible as well, so there's always someone who will know.
I think also, I mean, they say a picture tells 1,000 words. So one of the main parts of our project is making sure that we have at least one photo of every single object. And all of those photographs are uploaded onto the online database. So if we don't know something, like what kind of fur something is covered in, for example, all of those pictures are going onto the online database, and that can be very easily shared with people who might know better than we do, so source communities or researchers, specialists. So we can show them those photos, and then the idea is that hopefully more and more people can say, oh, I recognise that, so we can start to fill in some of the blanks that we maybe do have in our documentation with the knowledge of other people, and that project has been really amazing in being able to facilitate that. It's really nice to be part of that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I have certainly really enjoyed looking around here. Like, it's my first time here, so I'm very, very honoured. And you guys have even shown all these objects and the hard work you But is there any questions in the chat?
Not that I can see, but if anyone does have any questions, please do leave them in the chat below and we can get to them.
Well, I guess whilst we don't have any questions, I'll throw you guys some questions.
Yeah.
So what made you guys want to do this as a job?
I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think I've personally always been interested in working in like museums and things like that. And I did an apprenticeship a few years ago with a museum, and I think it's from there that like an interest in collections has just sort of blossomed. I think for me, collections can sort of tell so much about people's history and people's stories. And I think especially with this collection, because it's so broad, I mean, one of the main draws on the initial job advert was that you'll cover everything, like all the whole world all the time. And I think that's what is so special about this collection, is the chance to interact with that much. I mean, I've personally learned so much about things. I never knew I'd be interested in spears, for example, and here we are.
Yeah, I didn't do an internship, I did a placement at university, and I just thought it was a really interesting environment. I was at quite a different museum to this, but I found that I liked every single person that I met, and I think that's something that's kind of continued as I've worked in other museums. I've never really met somebody I didn't like, and that felt like a really good reason to go into a job, I suppose.
That's so great. I think both of you like covered that. To expect the unexpected working with museums. It's a very fun, interesting place to be.
No 2 days are quite the same.
People always ask you to do like a day in the life of museum work, and you're like, I can't. Literally every day is different. You never know.
We don't do words questions. I guess it's okay. But I know you guys do a lot of different objects from all over the world, and you guys are really careful as well of how you look after the objects, respecting culture and such. And yeah, especially from an education standpoint, you guys, the stuff that you do definitely helps us with teaching and displays and stuff. So what top tips would you give anyone watching for how to become you guys really?
I think visiting loads of museums is a really good start, because obviously you can see how other museums do things, and you can start to form ideas and opinions about, like, I really like the way that they did that, or I actually don't think they displayed that very well, or oh, the lighting in that place is really good, or the interpretation panels in that place are really long. So actually just going to lots of museums is a really good way of starting to learn more about them and to kind of develop like a bit of an expertise.
Volunteering is a really good way to sort of get into it as well. I think it's a good way to sort of dip your toe in the water and see if it's, you know, because there's so many museum jobs out there. I mean, I do love our job and we do collections, but I mean, there's education, there's curatorial work, which is more the research side, there's outreach, there's audience development, there's so much in museums. So I think volunteering and sort of maybe trying out a bit of everything at first, just to get that experience and to just see what sort of sparks your interest as well. I think that would be my top piece of advice. And there's so many resources out there as well for if you want to get into sort of the industry. So the Museums Association runs a lot of sort of kickstarting your career events and things like that, and they've got loads of advice on getting into the industry as well. Yeah, so just that sort of thing.
We have had a related question from Rosie. Is it possible to volunteer with you with the museum?
Oh.
Yeah, just check our website, I think, for any upcoming placements.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
That's the answer.
If you guys really want to see the work, the amazing work that these guys do, definitely check our collections website, and you can see all the things that they're updating and all the information that they fill out is there, as well as come into the museum and see some of the displays as well. These guys have looked after it, and if they haven't, they eventually will. So yes, definitely come in, ask more questions. But yeah, once again, thank you. If there's no more questions.
I have one more, and then I'll let you go. So you mentioned similar objects that you've liked working on. What's been your favourites, I guess? So yours is maybe spears?
I think spears, but we all have our favourite, the favourite object we've worked on as our computer screen on our laptops. Mine is, and there is actually its twin in the museum. There's a tiny little armadillo toy that has articulated head and tail, and it just goes like this. And I just thought it's just so reminiscent of like toys you have growing up. I don't know why I felt really excited by that object, but it's definitely one of my favourites, and it does have a twin in the museum, so go hunt that one down if you're ever around. It's from Mexico, so it will be in that section of the museum.
I really like musical instruments. I think I really like them because they're very varied. So I was working on them literally this morning, and I had everything from a drum that was covered in some kind of reptile skin, to a rattle that you gave me actually, that was like made of a coconut. So you get such a variety, and they're so lovely and they sound lovely and they're really exciting.
Great.
I think that's what's nice is everyone on the team has a different favourite type of object. So there's always someone you can go to and say, hey, you know about baskets, what type of weave is this? Or, you know, that sort of thing. And it's really nice to work in that kind of environment, and because you don't have to know everything, there'll always be someone there to help out as well. So
Cool.
Awesome. Well, yeah, once again, thank you guys so much. It has been extremely fun giving us this tour. And thank you to the rest of the Shorts team from Monday and those that just weren't there as well. It has been an absolute pleasure seeing your world, and I'm pretty sure that everyone has enjoyed it too. And if you guys watching have not seen the part 1, please go ahead and watch it and share this with your friends, because who doesn't love a behind the scenes at a museum, and especially at the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. So yeah, I've been Shereese, one of the museum educators at MAA, and these guys have been
Great.
we're really terrible at remembering our own.
It's Eleanor and Sam with the MAA team.
So yeah, thank you guys once again. Have a great evening, and make sure you share and give it a good like as well.
Bye.